Dawn broke over Lagos in muted gold, filtering through the iron gates of the Obafemi mansion like a promise Mira never expected. She stood on the cracked pavement outside the orphanage, clutching a single suitcase and the crumpled letter that offered her this position, an opportunity she feared as much as she needed. The orphanage matron, Mrs. Ease, pressed a loaf of bread and a jug of water into her trembling hands. "You're certain you understand the work, child?" Mrs. Ease asked, her voice soft but firm. "You'll rise before the sun, scrub floors, polish silver, and serve at the table all day. No complaints." Mira nodded, her dark eyes glinting with a mixture of desperation and determination. "Yes, ma'am. I want a chance." Mrs. Ease laid a worn hand on Mira's shoulder. "Good. But remember, pride won't pay your debts, only hard work will." As Mira walked toward the ornate gates, she caught sight of the mansion's looming silhouette, a fortress of marble and wrought iron, stark against the dusty sky. A chauffeur in a crisp uniform opened the gate with a mechanical nod, not sparing her a glance. Inside, peacocks roamed the manicured lawns, their feathers glinting like molten jewels. Everything felt impossible and surreal, the manicured hedges, the fountain with morning mist, the marble pillars that disappeared into shadow. Minutes later, she stood at the servants' entrance where a stern butler, Mr. Ade, inspected her resume and tucked it into his coat pocket without comment. "You start now," he said. "The mistress has callers at 10. Prepare the drawing room." Mira's heart hammered as she curtsied low and followed him through echoing corridors. The carpets were too thick, the chandeliers too grand, and the walls too silent, until she heard muffled laughter from behind a gilded door. She straightened her spine and knocked softly. "Come in," called a cool voice. Inside, polished crystal decanters lined a sideboard, and a tall woman with ash-blonde hair surveyed a business card. She wore a tailored suit that spoke of power and detachment. Her nameplate read Evelyn Obafemi, CEO. Her glance at Mira was sharp, appraising. "You're the new maid?" Evelyn's voice held a trace of boredom. Mira swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mira." Evelyn's lips curved into something like interest. "I hope you're better at serving tea than you look on paper." Mira forced a nod, her throat dry. "I won't disappoint you, ma'am." The click of Evelyn's heels on marble was the only farewell as she turned back to her callers. Mira exhaled, this was her new world. She balanced her first tray of porcelain cups so carefully she could hear her own breath. In that moment, she vowed never to let failure define her. By mid-morning, the Obafemi mansion hummed with activity. A fleet of black cars lined the driveway as stylists, photographers, and executives gathered in the grand hall for Evelyn's quarterly board meeting. Mira, in a crisp uniform far too big for her slender frame, wiped down a rosewood side table with trembling hands. Inside the boardroom, Evelyn presided over a holographic runway presentation projected above the conference table. "We need fresh faces, bold lines, something to disrupt the market," she declared, her voice commanding attention. One executive, Mr. Adekunle, shifted in his seat. "Our last line fell short of projections. If we don't pivot now, our IPO in 2 months could be in jeopardy." Evelyn's jaw tightened, dark eyes flicking to the screen. "Then find a designer who understands disruption." She glanced toward the door, as though expecting someone unexpected. Down the corridor, Mira carried a pitcher of water, trying to memorize the layout of printed graphs and color palettes taped to the glass walls. She paused outside the boardroom, curiosity warring with fear. On the marble sill lay a single, gleaming necklace, a delicate chain with a heart-shaped pendant, half buried under a stack of contracts. Mira's fingers itched to touch it, but she resisted. Instead, she poured water into crystal glasses and backed away, reminding herself this was not her world. As she retreated, a stray sunbeam caught the pendant, and for a heartbeat, Mira froze, her breath caught in her chest at a flicker of recognition she couldn't explain. Inside, Evelyn ended the meeting with a sigh. Damage control first, innovation second. Dismissed. Her assistants bowed and filed out, leaving her alone in the hushed room. The door clicked shut behind them, and Evelyn drifted toward her desk, but then paused mid-step as though sensing something. She turned sharply and strode to the door. "Maid," she called. Mira started, heart jolting. "Why yes, ma'am?" Evelyn pointed at the necklace on the sill. "Pick that up. And bring it to me, now." Mira obeyed, hands shaking so violently she feared the chain might slip. Evelyn's gaze bore into her as Mira knelt to scoop up the pendant. "Your hands are too cold to hold silver," Evelyn observed, her voice devoid of empathy. "Come back tomorrow in gloves." Mira nodded, cheeks flaming. She left the room with the necklace clasped against her chest. Once the door shut, she allowed herself one small smile. A crack had appeared in Evelyn's armor, and she intended to exploit it, if she could just comprehend why that necklace felt strangely familiar. Night fell like velvet over the Obathmi compound. Inside the servants' quarters, a cramped suite of 2 small rooms, Mira lay on her narrow cot staring at the ceiling fan's spinning blades. Exhaustion pressed on her eyelids, but sleep was elusive. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and drew out a battered sketchpad and stub of charcoal. By the dim light of a single bulb, she flipped to a blank page and hesitated. Then her fingers moved, guided by dreams she'd buried long ago. The charcoal danced, sweeping gowns with asymmetrical hems, bold geometric patterns, and flourish-winged collars that caught light like stained glass. Each stroke reclaimed a part of herself she'd thought lost. At first, a soft creak jolted her heart as the room's other occupants settled in for the night. She froze, cover pulled to her chin, then relaxed when she heard only the muffled snores of the older maid, Mama Funk. Mira exhaled and continued. She sketched the pendant she'd handled hours before, its heart-shaped form now blossoming into a teardrop motif surrounded by filigree. As she drew, memories whispered in her mind, a blacksmith's hammer, a lullaby in a low voice, a woman's tear-streaked face in a dream she couldn't place. A sudden knock at the door sent Mira flinching. She snapped the sketchbook shut and slid it under her cot. Heart pounding, she called softly, "Yes?" "Who's up?" asked a rough voice. "Shift change. They're done cleaning the West Wing." Mira exhaled, relief flooding her. "I'm here," she replied. "Good. Report to Mr. Ade, clock out in 15. The footsteps receded, and Mira waited another minute before retrieving her sketchbook. She turned to a new page, a floor plan of the mansion's east wing, corridors marked in red, where she might slip unseen to Evelyn's private chambers. She traced a path from the servants' entrance to the study where she'd seen the necklace. If she could get there, she might find answers about who she was, and why that pendant felt like a piece of her soul. But sleep finally claimed her before plans could solidify, and in her dreams, the necklace glowed against a dark sky, calling her home. The next morning, Mira's world felt both sharper and more fragile. Her muscles ached from the scrubbing she'd done before sunrise, but her mind buzzed with the possibilities her sketches implied. She ducked into the empty study when the staff cat walked away, feigning dusting of tall bookcases. Every fiber of her being told her to flee, yet she edged closer to the desk where the necklace had lain. With a quick glance down the corridor, empty. Mira's heart thundered as she carefully opened the top drawer. Inside lay a small velvet box. Hands trembling, she lifted the lid. There, nestled in royal purple, lay the heart-shaped pendant, identical to the one she'd handed Evelyn. But more, etched across its back was the name Evelyn, and beneath it, a second name, so faint she almost missed it, Mira. She stared, breath caught. How could 2 names be on the same piece of jewelry? Her fingers traced the engraving as an alarm sounded from the corridor, the butler's voice echoing, "Mira. What are you doing in here?" Eyes wide, Mira snapped the box shut and slid it back. I was looking for the feather duster, sir." The butler's stern face loomed. "Better not lie to me. Return to your duties." Swallowing, Mira backed away. She couldn't explain the truth, that the pendant bore her name, that 1,000 forgotten memories surged within her. All she could do was nod and leave the room, cheeks flaming. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright, too revealing. For the first time since arriving, she questioned everything. Who is Evelyn to this necklace? Why did it link their names so definitively? And, most terrifying, how much did Evelyn herself know? That evening, Mira slipped back through the servants' gate and hurried across dusty roads to the orphanage. Mrs. E's welcomed her with a knowing look, as though she'd been waiting. You look pale, child, the matron observed, guiding Mira to a wobbly wooden bench in the courtyard lit by a single lamp. You found something today? Mira hesitated, then produced the small velvet box. Mrs. E's gasped, her weathered hands trembling as she held it. Where did you get this? Mira told her everything, the mansion, the necklace in Evelyn's room, the engraving of their names. Mrs. E's eyes filled with tears. This was your mother's, she whispered. She wore it until the day she disappeared. The blacksmith in Ajagunal made this for her, she never took it off. You were only a baby when, her voice cracked. Mira pressed the pendant to her heart. My mother, she was rich, then she... Mrs. E's nodded. They say a bust in her carriage. No body was ever found. Your father, the matron paused, was a prominent textile merchant. Evelyn lost everything the day you were stolen. Memories flickered in Mira's mind, a lullaby, the crash of carriage wheels, a woman's desperate whisper of her name. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't remember her, but I want to. Mrs. E's laid a letter in Mira's lap, a brittle, yellowed envelope sealed with wax. Inside lay a single page, a scrawled note from the late caretaker of the mansion. If my mistress ever wonders what became of her daughter, let her know, the child wears her heart. Mira's breath caught. She understood now, the necklace had been a mother's guide, a daughter's claim. The whisper of her past grew louder, urging her back to the mansion. As she walked home under a canopy of stars, the city's hum seemed to pulse with possibility. Tomorrow, she would return, not as a frightened maid, but as a daughter seeking justice. The past was no longer a distant echo, it whispered her name with every beat of her heart. And somewhere in the grand halls of the Obafemi estate, Evelyn would soon hear it too. The morning sun had barely kissed the horizon when Mira arrived at the Obafemi mansion again, her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. She'd slept fitfully in the orphanage, haunted by the velvet box's secrets and the matron's revelations. Today, however, she had a plan, to slip into Evelyn's private study, retrieve the original birth record stubbed away in that hidden drawer, and, if possible, leave before anyone noticed her absence. But fate, the most capricious of gods, had other designs. Mira was dusting the marble staircase near the study when she heard the crisp echo of high heels and stifled laughter. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching her feather duster like a talisman. Through the doorway, she glimpsed Evelyn strolling out of the boardroom, accompanied by two high-powered investors. Their conversation, muffled as it was through the thick oak, prickled at Mira's ears. Your last line looked amateurish, Evelyn was saying, her tone polished steel. I need designs that will redefine African couture, something no one's ever seen. One investor, a tall man with silver hair, frowned. Your numbers are strong, Evelyn, but we need a spectacle. A new face. A designer whose story resonates. Evelyn's lips curved in a slow smile. I may have just the thing. She shot a glance toward Mira's hiding spot. For a moment, their eyes locked, a flicker of recognition passed between them, unsettling and electric. Mira's breath caught. She retreated silently and walked straight into Mr. Ade, the butler, who stood like a sentinel. You're in the wrong place, he said, voice low. Give me that duster and follow me. Her mind raced. In any moment, he could hand her over to Evelyn. But as he guided her down the corridor, Mira noticed something on his desk, a stack of erased sketches, lines and shapes eerily similar to her own nocturnal drawings. They were discarded ideas from Evelyn's design team. Someone had been spying on their work. Her pulse thundered. Was the accusation poised against her? Moments later, Evelyn herself appeared, arms akimbo, storm dark eyes fixed on Mira. The butler ducked away, leaving Mira alone before the woman who held her destiny in her gaze. "Explain this," Evelyn demanded, waving a crumpled sketch in front of her. It was Myra's drawing of a gown with swirling lace, a piece she created hours ago under the servants' quarters lamp. Myra's mouth went dry. I was only sketching in my free time," she stammered. "I thought." "Thought what?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "That you had the right to my company's intellectual property? That you could infiltrate my design process and pass it off as your own?" Tears pricked in Myra's eyes. "No, ma'am. I'm not a designer for Obafemi fashion. I drew it because the necklace reminded me of home, of my mother's stories. That shape came from memory, not from my boss's boardroom." Evelyn's lips thinned. "All I know is that someone leaked these designs, and you happen to be the only outsider around." She unfolded the sketches and thrust them at Mira. "You're fired. You'll gather your belongings and leave the grounds by sunset." A cold wave of fear and despair washed over Mira. She nodded numbly, her legs weak. The investors passed by in the hallway, their murmurs frank. "If her designs are genuine, perhaps we should hire the talent outright," one whispered. "But this charade—" Mira looked up, bitterness and resolve sparking in her gaze. "Charade?" she said, voice trembling but clear. "This isn't a charade to me, it's my life." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Collect your things and go." As she was escorted by the butler to the servants' quarters to pack, Myra's mind raced through possibilities. The sketches in Mr. Aid's drawer, the investor's curiosity, Evelyn's flicker of recognition, everything pointed to one truth: she and Evelyn were inexorably linked. She simply had to live long enough to prove it. Myra's footsteps echoed hollowly as she left the Obafemi grounds for the last time, at least for now. The gates clanged shut behind her, and she paused on the cracked pavement, suitcase in hand, to watch the peacocks strut obliviously in the lawn beyond. Each feather seemed to mock her, so beautiful, so untouchable. The journey back to the orphanage was a blur. Mrs. Ease flung open the creaking front door when Mira arrived, her face lined with worry and something fiercer, anger. "They dare fire you for that?" she demanded, helping Mira inside. "Tell me everything." Mira collapsed on the shabby couch in the parlor, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "They said I stole the designs. They said I wasn't entitled to draw in the mansion." Her voice cracked. "They made me beg for my paycheck." Mrs. E sank beside her. "Here, you need sustenance." She handed Mira a bowl of jollof rice, its spicy aroma a balm. "Listen, your mother, Evelyn, didn't recognize you today, but I saw the way she gazed at you. Something in her eyes." Mira pressed the necklace through her uniform pocket. "Do you really think she knows?" The matron's lips trembled. "I know she does. That pendant is proof enough. But she's too proud to admit it. She'll deny until the walls crumble." Mira wiped her tears. "I have to get back in. I have to find the birth records." Mrs. Ease reached into a locked drawer and withdrew an envelope sealed with wax, the same letter Mira had received earlier. "This will guide you. But first, you need allies." "Mama Funk?" Mira asked, nodding toward the elderly maid snoozing in her corner. The kindly woman had whispered hints of a conspiratorial old nanny, an aged aunt who'd once cared for Evelyn's newborn. "Exactly," Mrs. Ease agreed. "She lives just beyond the dorm. Seize her trust, and she'll help. But be careful, Evelyn has eyes everywhere." Mira finished her rice and squared her shoulders. "I have nowhere else to go. I have to try." The next morning, before dawn, Mira slipped out again, this time aiming for the small house next door, the old nanny's cottage, its peeling paint and overgrown vines a stark contrast to the Obafemi mansion's grandeur. The cottage door creaked as Mira pushed it open. Inside, beams of morning light sliced through dusty air, illuminating crocheted doilies and faded photographs on the walls. An elderly woman sat in a rocking chair, her back curved but her presence resolute. Mama Uchenna? Mira ventured. The old woman squinted beneath thick glasses. Who's there? I was a maid at the Obafemi mansion. Mira held out the letter. Mrs. E's sent me. Uchenna's eyes widened at the sight of the wax seal, a coat of arms featuring a teardrop motif. She beckoned Mira closer. This belonged to my mistress, Evelyn, she whispered. She never spoke of it after that night. Mira Saturday, I'm told it holds clues about my past. About how I came to the orphanage. Uchenna unsealed the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single handwritten page in elegant script. My dearest Uchenna, if anything should befall me, should I ever lose my child, know that my heart will guide her home. Keep this safe, one day, my daughter will need it. Uchenna's breath caught. She wrote this on the night of the storm. The carriage accident. I tucked it away, thinking she'd send for it herself. Myra's pulse pounded. I've seen the pendant. It bears both our names. The old nanny nodded. That heart was hers and hers alone. She clasped it around her newborn's neck days after birth. But the midwife said the baby vanished. Mistress believed the child dead. Mira closed her eyes. That child could be me. Uchenna's hand trembled as she produced a small stack of faded records. Here, the baptismal registry. The name is scratched out, but the date matches the accident night. I've kept this hidden. Mira unfurled the pages, tracing the smudged entry with tears in her eyes. The date, February 21st, 2003, her birthday, as she'd always imagined it. Next to it, infant female, mother unknown. I have to know more, Mira whispered. I need proof. Then you'll need that DNA test, Uchenna said, lowering her voice. The only person who can order it is Evelyn herself. But she'll never authorize it. You must find another way, get a sample discreetly. Mira clenched her fists. I will. No matter the risk. As she left the cottage, letter and record secure in her bag, the weight of her destiny pressed upon her shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but at least now she had allies and evidence. The whispers of the past had become a roar in her heart. She would reclaim her legacy, no matter what stood in her way. Under the guise of applying for a temporary sewing position, Mira returned to the Obafemi mansion service entrance. She presented references from a small tailor's shop, Uchenna's idea. The butler frowned, but the CFO, Mr. Adekunle, intervened. We need extra hands, he said. We're behind schedule for the spring collection. Evelyn, behind mirrored sunglasses, studied Myra's face. For a heartbeat, recognition shimmered in her gaze, but she turned away. Very well. You start in the fitting room. Mira exhaled, barely concealing relief. She'd been granted 3 days to work among the seamstresses, mending hems and pressing fabrics. It was enough time to observe, to gather a swab of Evelyn's discarded lipstick from her office, to find clues hidden in design ledgers. Inside the bustling atelier, machines whirred and bolt cutters snipped. Designers sketched patterns on tables strewn with lace and leather. Mira moved among them, her hands deft with needle and thread, all the while memorizing security codes taped under desks and observing Evelyn's routine. At noon, she ducked into the staff restroom off the east corridor, angled beneath the boardroom, and saw Evelyn's leather handbag slung over a chair. Heart hammering, Mira lifted the bag and searched silently until she found a discarded tissue stained with Evelyn's DNA. She sealed it in a small vial Uchenna had given her. Mission accomplished. Returning to the atelier, she nearly collided with Mr. Adekunle. Careful, he warned. You've only been here 1 day. Impress me, or you're out. Mira bowed low. Thank you, sir. I will. That afternoon, she discovered a hidden ledger behind Evelyn's desk, a guestbook from the mansion's earliest days. In delicate handwriting, she traced entries, blessing Obafemi, Mira e. Her breath caught. Beneath blessing Obafemi, her grandmother's name, another faint entry, Mira. It was as if history itself had been documenting her return. She slid the ledger back and exhaled slowly. Evidence of lineage. Now she had letters, records, a DNA sample, and a ledger proving her family's identity. Everything hinged on confirming the test results, and on confronting Evelyn at the perfect moment. But as dusk fell and the atelier emptied, Mira felt a tremor of doubt. Evelyn's empire was built on ambition, and now that Mira threatened it, the consequences could be dire. She steeled herself, pain was inevitable, but the truth must shine through. The following morning, the mansion felt colder than ever. Mira braced herself for confrontation. She'd scheduled the DNA test drop-off at a discreet clinic, thanks to Uchenna's contacts, and now all that remained was waiting. In the boardroom, a hush fell as Evelyn swept in, followed by top executives. Behind a steel door, Mira lingered with her sewing kit, eavesdropping on the investors' murmurs. One of the seamstresses is rumored to have family ties to the Obafemi line, Mr. Adekunle said, barely above a whisper. Perhaps we should explore that narrative for publicity. Evelyn's laugh was brittle. I don't mix family with business. If that girl has designs, fine, use her talent. But she remains an employee, nothing more. Myra's heart ached. So close, and yet Evelyn's walls remained unbreached. She left the atelier and slipped into Evelyn's office, determined to deliver the final blow, the clinic's confirmation that the test was processed and matched. Finding no one around, she crept to the desk and opened the top drawer, revealing a sleek envelope addressed to Mira O, in Evelyn's handwriting. Her pulse leaped. Had Evelyn been expecting this? Inside the envelope lay two things, a photograph of a newborn baby swaddled in a white blanket, tiny, almond-eyed, dark-haired, and the second, the physician's report, with Evelyn's signature and date. Mira sank to her knees, tears blurring her vision. Evelyn had documented her birth in secret. The report read, infant female, born February 21, 2003. Mother, Evelyn Obafemi. Child removed under circumstances unknown. The truth sat between them in black and white. The woman who abandoned her, the woman who hunted her, both the same. She heard footsteps, Evelyn's heels, grow closer. Heart thunderous, Mira stuffed the photograph and report into her pocket and exited the office, pausing at the door to steel herself. Evelyn stood there, arms folded, as if she'd been waiting. The silver light from the hallway caught on her earrings, the same teardrop motif as the necklace. You took my records, Evelyn said quietly. I entrusted you with fabric, but not my history. Mira stepped forward, voice steadier than she felt. I did it to prove that I belong to you, in every way that matters. Evelyn's expression hardened, then cracked, revealing raw pain. You have no right, none, to waltz in here and demand my truth. Mira pressed the photograph to her heart. I have more right than you know. Before Evelyn could respond, the butler appeared. Mistress, there's a call from Mr. Adekunle. He insists on seeing you immediately. Evelyn's gaze flickered to the office door. Go, she said to Mira. Prove your lineage if you dare, just don't expect mercy. As Mira walked away, clutching the stolen proof, her chest swelled. She was one step closer to reclaiming her life. But she also understood that the coming battles would be fiercer than she'd imagined. Evelyn's empire, her pride, and her heartbreak all stood between mother and daughter. With the evidence in her hand and the clinic's confirmation on the way, Mira felt the swell of destiny. Soon, the truth would no longer be a whisper, it would roar through the Obafemi empire. Late one rainy evening, Mira slipped back into the Obafemi mansion under cover of darkness, her heart thudding with trepidation. Lightning spat across the sky as she crept through a side corridor, clutching the battered photo of the swaddled infant and the clinic report. Every shadow seemed to stretch into a threat. Her destination was the old servants' staircase, narrow, unlit, and used only by the longest-tenured staff. At its base lived Mrs. Ao, the frail former nanny who'd once rocked countless babies to sleep in Evelyn's nursery. Mira had never met her, but Uchenna had vouched for her loyalty. She reached the bottom step, hand hovering over the chipped ivory door. A soft rasping voice, older than memory, called her name. Mira, child? The doorway framed Mrs. Ao's stooped figure, white hair tucked beneath a faded scarf. Lines etched her face like a topographical map of sorrow and secrets. You came back, the nanny whispered, beckoning her inside. The room was spare, a simple cot, a small writing desk littered with old ledgers, and a single lamp burning low. Mira placed the photo and report on the desk. I need you to tell Evelyn the truth. Mrs. Ao's eyes glistened. I have carried this secret for 22 years. I saw the newborn taken, my hands held her, her cry in my ears. I vowed to protect her. She rummaged through a locked drawer and produced a faded leather journal. This belonged to Mistress Blessing, she said, referring to Evelyn's mother. Blessing wrote of her joy, her terror when the baby was stolen. You must read this. Myra's fingers shook as she opened the journal. On the first page, in elegant scrawl. My dearest daughter. If you are reading this, know your mother loved you beyond words. Tears blurred Myra's vision. She realized the journal contained detailed entries about the pregnancy, the night of the accident, and Blessing Obafemi's frantic search for her child. Give this to Evelyn, Mrs. Ao insisted. Let her see the pain she buried. Mira nodded, folding the journal carefully into her bag. A distant thunderclap jolted them both. You're playing with fire, child, Mrs. Ao cautioned. But your fire is the truth. Clutching the journal and the clinic report, Mira crept back up the staircase, resolve hardening like steel. Tomorrow, she would confront Evelyn with every piece of evidence, photograph, DNA confirmation, baptismal registry, and now this heartbreakingly intimate journal. At dawn, Mira posed as the new cutter's assistant in the fashion atelier. She arrived before the sun, her uniform crisp, her expression composed. Under one sleeve, she hid the leather-bound journal. When the day's fittings began, she waited until lunchtime, then slipped away toward the private wing, Evelyn's domain. Security was tight, but Mira had memorized every badge swipe panel and motion sensor. She ghosted past two guards who, accustomed to her presence, barely registered her passing. At the end of a velvet-carpeted hallway, she found it, a door unmarked except for a small keypad. Hard in her throat, she tapped the code she'd observed on Mr. Aid's desk weeks before. The lock clicked. Inside lay Evelyn's secret sanctuary, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a grand desk buried in files, and an ornate armoire. Mira laid the journal gently atop the desk and opened drawers one by one. In the bottom drawer of the armoire, she discovered a black leather portfolio stamped with the Obafemi family crest. Inside the portfolio were originals of Myra's birth certificate, sealed letters from legal counsel, and a notarized affidavit declaring Evelyn the sole heir of her father's estate and, by blood, Mira as co-heir. A sudden click behind her sent Myra's blood cold. Evelyn stood in the doorway, arms folded, face ashen. So you've broken every rule to find family, Evelyn said, voice low but shaking. You've rifled through my private files, stolen my mother's journal, and now you expect me to believe you belong here? Mira met her gaze steadily. You hid these documents. But you couldn't hide the truth. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes blazing. Truth? You think you can waltz in, accuse me of living a lie, and I'll welcome you with open arms? Mira opened the journal to the first entry, voice firm despite the quake in her chest. Read this, Mother. It's from Blessing Obafemi, your mother, my grandmother. Evelyn snatched the journal, flipping through pages stained with age and tears. As she read, her posture softened, shoulders sagging under the weight of memories. I kept this locked away to protect you, from the shame, the scandal, she murmured, barely audible. I thought burying it would bury my guilt. Mira advanced. But guilt is a poor substitute for a mother's love. Evelyn looked up, tears pooling. My love was meant for you. I was too proud, too afraid. Behind them, the mansion's silent walls seemed to pulse with anticipation. The confrontation that would redefine their lives had begun. In the days that followed, Evelyn and Mira remained sequestered in that secret room, exchanging stories as thunderclouds gathered over Lagos. Evelyn recounted the carriage accident in agonizing detail, how she'd cursed fate as her baby disappeared into the storm, how grief had hardened her heart, and how she'd built the fashion empire to outrun her pain. Mira, in turn, narrated her years in the orphanage, nights spent sketching dresses by lamplight, the matron's kindness, Uchena's guidance, and the moment the pendant found her again. But words alone could not heal the wound. They needed scientific certainty. Evelyn retrieved the clinic's envelope Mira had slipped into her desk days before, the one stamped DNA report, confidential. Hands trembling, she broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet. DNA match confirmation. Patient A, Mira Obafemi, Patient B, Evelyn Obafemi. Relationship, biological mother and daughter. Probability of maternity, 99.999%. Evelyn's breath caught as she read each word, her face draining of color. She looked up at Mira, eyes shimmering. It can't be this straightforward. Mira stepped forward, voice gentle, it is. You carry my blood, mother, and I carry yours. Evelyn sank into a leather armchair, covering her face. I abandoned you, she whispered. A child should never pay the price for her mother's fear. Mira knelt beside her, pressing a hand to Evelyn's arm. You didn't abandon me by choice. You survived in your way. Now we can heal together. Evelyn peeled back her tears. What happens to the empire? To everything I built? Mira's gaze was fierce with empathy. It belongs to both of us now. But first, we find forgiveness. Behind them, the mansion's rain-soaked windows bore witness, two women reunited against the odds, bound by blood and a destiny that neither could deny. Word of Mira's return sealed by DNA rippled through the upper echelons of Obafemi fashion. At an emergency board meeting, Evelyn appeared, pale but resolute, flanked by Mira, whose presence surprised every executive present. Mr. Adekunle cleared his throat. Madam, we have the official report. It confirms, well, everything. He laid the document before the board. Executive eyes darted between Evelyn and Mira. Whispers erupted, is she the heir? Mother and daughter? Evelyn stood tall. Yes. This is my daughter. Our company is now a family legacy, one I intend to honor together. One board member, Ms. Obiora, spoke up sharply. With all due respect, nepotism can undermine investor confidence. Mira lifted her chin. Or it can strengthen our brand. Authenticity resonates with consumers more than any marketing campaign. Our story of tragedy, resilience, and reunion will redefine African fashion on the world stage. A murmur of approval spread. Investors exchanged intrigued glances. Evelyn nodded slowly. Effective immediately, Mira Obafemi is named co-creative director. We will incorporate her designs and her story into our next line. The room erupted in polite applause, some skeptical, some eager. But the board's unanimous vote sealed Mira's position. As the meeting adjourned, Evelyn and Mira stood alone in the grand hall. Evelyn draped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. You've saved more than our company, she said softly. You've saved me. Mira smiled, eyes bright. And you saved me, too, Mother. That night, the Obafemi mansion shimmered with anticipation as preparations began for the next day's press announcement. Yet behind the glittering facade, a shadow of doubt lingered. Evelyn paced her private quarters, clutching the DNA report. Mira watched quietly from the doorway. I can't believe how easily everyone accepted it, Evelyn murmured, anguish in her voice. They think I just forgive and forget? Mira stepped forward. You don't have to forget. You have to move forward. Evelyn halted, eyes glistening. Every boardroom I built, every design I've signed off on, I did alone. Admitting you belong, that feels like weakening my legacy. Mira crossed to her mother. Your legacy isn't your solitude. It's the empire you created despite your pain. Now it's ours to share. Evelyn shook her head, tears slipping free. I'm not sure I can do this. I feel unworthy. Mira placed the pendant around Evelyn's neck, the very heart-shaped locket that had brought them together. You are worthy of love, mother. And worthy of redemption. Evelyn closed her eyes, fingers curling around the locket. I'm scared, she confessed. Scared of losing control, scared of the world seeing my weakness. Mira lifted her mother's chin, making her meet her gaze. Vulnerability is strength. Our story is proof. For a long moment, Evelyn stood silent, then exhaled a trembling breath. All right, she whispered. Tomorrow, we face the world, together. Outside, the night sky crackled with distant thunder. Inside, a mother and daughter embraced, ready to rewrite their destiny. The Obafemi boardroom crackled with tension as Evelyn and Mira took their seats at the head of the table. Outside, rain sluiced down the windows like a warning. On the silk-lined conference table lay red-stamped financial reports. Mr. Adekunle, the CFO, cleared his throat. Last quarter's shortfall has worsened. Our stock slid 18% after the IPO, and investors are demanding accountability. His eyes flicked to Evelyn, then to Mira. An icy silence fell. Evelyn's jaw clenched. We pivoted too late, she admitted, voice low. The spring line didn't land. A veteran board member, Ms. Obiora, leaned forward. We need radical innovation or risk a hostile takeover. Mira rose, heart pounding. I have a proposal, she said, setting down a slim portfolio. The room stiffened. These are my sketches for a capsule collection, futuristic Ankara meets minimalism. If approved, we can launch in 2 weeks with a digital show that will re-engage our audience. She clicked a remote, and holographic prototypes of her gowns shimmered above the table, asymmetrical peplums, laser-cut lace, and bold color blocking. Gasps rippled through the room. Investor voices overlapped. This is fresh, bold, exactly what we need. Ms. Obiora swallowed. This could work. Evelyn studied Mira's confident gaze. Somewhere in that crowd of suits, the old fear of failure still lurked, but pride swelled as she witnessed her daughter's talent shining through crisis. I endorse this plan, Evelyn declared, voice steady. We'll greenlight the capsule line immediately and put Mira at the creative helm. The board erupted in applause. In that moment, the empire teetered on collapse, and Mira's vision became its lifeline. Late that night, Evelyn wandered the mansion's dim corridors, unable to sleep. The day's victory felt hollow without healing the wound between her and Mira. She found herself drawn to the old nursery, long since converted into an archive room. Inside, dust motes danced in the moonlight. A tarnished mobile still hung from the ceiling, a cluster of carved wooden stars and moons. Evelyn paused beneath it, memories stirring, the lullaby her mother sang, the delicate cradle that rocked under her hands. As her fingers brushed a faded star, a vivid vision struck her, Blessing's gentle voice calling, Mira, my heart, my daughter. Evelyn staggered back, tears springing to her eyes. Behind her, a soft voice, Mother? Mira stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Evelyn's shoulders shook. I remember holding you. Mira stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Evelyn. It's okay to let it out. Evelyn's tears fell freely. I locked this room away because I couldn't bear the pain. But I can't run from it any longer. Together, they sifted through the archive boxes, baby blankets, Blessing's diary entries, even an old photograph of Evelyn as a child with her own mother. With each artifact, Evelyn reclaimed a fragment of her past and found Mira at her side, steady and forgiving. The next morning, Evelyn prepared for the press briefing in her suite. She stood before a tall, ornate mirror, the same one she'd used every day since inheriting the empire. Now, she hesitated, unsure who stared back, the ruthless CEO or the frightened mother. Mira entered quietly, carrying the family journal. "Read this today," she suggested, handing the pages to Evelyn. Evelyn opened to a passage where Blessing confessed her greatest regret, losing her child. As she read aloud, her voice broke. Mira stepped behind her, wrapping her arms in a gentle embrace. In the mirror's reflection, two women stood together, once adversaries, now united. Evelyn raised her hand to the glass, fingertips tracing the outline of her own face, then Mira's beside it. Tears pooled in her eyes. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," Evelyn whispered. Mira pressed her cheek to her mother's shoulder. "You protected me by surviving. And now we protect each other." They lingered before the mirror, letting the moment of reconciliation settle. When they finally stepped away, their reflection remained, healed, whole, and ready to face the world. That evening, the Obafemi flagship boutique buzzed with celebrities, influencers, and press. A sleek runway snaked between rows of seats. Above, spotlights cut through the haze. "From Maid to Heiress" was emblazoned on the screen. Backstage, Mira adjusted the collar of her finale gown, a flowing silk and ochre fusion that echoed her first sketch. Evelyn appeared, glowing with pride. "Remember," she said, pressing a kiss to Mira's temple, "this is our story." The lights dimmed. A hush fell. Music swelled as models in Mira's capsule collection paraded down the runway. Gasps and applause cascaded through the audience at each innovative design. And then, at the finale, Mira emerged, stunned silence gave way to thunderous ovation. She paused at center stage. Evelyn stepped out from the wings, taking her daughter's hand. The two walked the last steps together, bows synchronized, tears gleaming in their eyes. Cameras flashed. Reporters buzzed, "Is that mother and daughter? What a reunion!" Social media exploded with clips of their embrace on stage. In that moment, Mira knew they had not only saved the company, they had rewritten its narrative, transforming a tale of loss into one of triumphant reunion. Weeks later, the Obafemi fashion headquarters bustled with new energy. Mira's co-creative office overlooked the atelier, where teams collaborated on their next line. Evelyn paused in the hallway, watching Mira guide a young designer through pattern cuts. A soft chime announced visitors, Mrs. E's and Uchenna, the matron and the old nanny. Invitations had been sent for a private presentation of the philanthropic initiative, the Mira Obafemi Fashion Scholarship, dedicated to orphan girls with design talents. In the Grand Hall, Mira and Evelyn unveiled a scholarship certificate and pledged funds to the orphanage. As Mira spoke, eyes bright, she dedicated the program to every child whose story deserves a second chapter. Mrs. E's wept openly, Uchenna hugged Mira. Evelyn stepped forward, voice steady, "Today, we honor the past and invest in the future, where no child feels forgotten." Later, under the same mango tree where Mira once daydreamed, the pair shared a quiet moment. Evelyn wrapped a shawl around Mira's shoulders. "You made me whole," she said. Mira smiled. "We made each other whole." As the sun set over Lagos, mother and daughter walked side by side, no longer maid and mistress, but equals united by blood, by truth, and by love. The empire they built together would stand as proof that even the deepest wounds can be healed when hearts dare to forgive. The end.